From the Twitter, People for Bernie. The Congress members that supported the insurrectionists must be removed. It says, or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or an executive or judicial official of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same. And this is from directly the Constitution, except for no one in Congress engaged in insurrection. But this is what the left says. Cory Bush has a resolution for this. My first resolution in Congress will be to call for the expulsion of the Republican members of Congress who incited this domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol. And then, of course, we have some other memes. People for Bernie retweeting the former chief ethics lawyer for George Bush because that's how wrong the other side is. I love it. And this is what goes on in Twitter, folks. Here we have Ted Cruz. Epic hypocrisy. Facts. Nazis were evil bigots. You and your anti-Israel pals blocked a resolution condemning anti-Semitism, which I passed unanimously in the Senate. Unless they are genocidal, calling your political opponents Nazis is atrocious. And that is to AOC, who said this. They wore Auschwitz shirts, erected gallows, and tried to hang the vice president. Where is the video footage of that, AOC? You are full of garbage. Your continued excusal and denial of Wednesday's neo-Nazi presence is abhorrent and dangerous. The most healing and unifying thing you can do is take responsibility for your actions and resign. Yes, yes. Sure. People for Bernie. One more time for the extreme right-wing senator from Texas who should resign from the Jewish senator of Vermont. And I'll just play this video real quick.
I am not anti-Israel, but the fact of the matter is that Netanyahu is a right-wing politician who I think is treating the Palestinian people extremely unfairly. I am not anti-Israel, but the fact...
Ah, yes. And then that is quote tweeting Ted Cruz. Here, Sophia Killer says, being an anti-Zionist is not being anti-Semitic. Centrist and liberal Jews agree and have stated so. You're defending colonialist, imperialist ideologies that are unrelated to faith. They are greedy, ethnocidal, land-grabbing attitudes with expansion at the core. Except for that's not what's happening. The Palestinians have a large amount of land, and the Jews cannot go in that area. But the Palestinians can come into Israel. The really interesting part of this, of course, is that colonialist and imperialist is the terminology they like to bring about. But yet the stated goal of all the Marxists is to basically colonize and imperialize the world with their Marxist beliefs. They speak out of both sides of their mouths, folks. Not if now. Being pro-Israel does not exonerate you from abetting Nazis, Teddy. Hi, Jewish here. The idea that we should never invoke the Nazis before genocide is going to be antithetical to never again. It is our moral duty to learn from history, identity tactics Nazis like Goebbels utilized, and call them out where they see them used before it's too late. Well, I'll call you out, Mr. Abraham. I'll call you out 1,000% because by labeling white folks you are as the worst, most evil thing on earth, you are essentially doing the exact same scapegoating that was done to the Jewish people by the Nazis in Germany. And your policies, if you are on the left, are closer to fascism than anything Ted Cruz espouses, which is constitutionalism. The idea of the constitutional federalist republic that the United States is supposed to be is completely antithetical to Nazi authoritarianism or left-wing authoritarianism or centralized control of the economy. That might be what we participate in today, but that is not how we are supposed to be. And the People for Bernie, revisiting this epic Twitter battle between the treasonous Ted Cruz and national treasure AOC. You can see how this right-wing fascist deflects from his actions, inciting a violent siege on the Capitol to vote on a resolution about condemning bigotry. They are not the same. All Ted Cruz did was say, let's certify the vote in a proper way. Let's investigate the claims. That's not inciting insurrection, folks. The far right has made dramatic moves this month. Biden is already working to accommodate these racist and xenophobes, signaling he will not interrupt ISIS deportations. Well, duh, that Obama was doing all the stuff that Trump did and worse. And family separation policy for fear of backlash if the honors his campaign promises. And that is, it's going down. This is specifically from a retweet from New York City Antifa, the, just an idea kind of group. Here from New York City Antifa, a retweet. Are you shocked? Shocked that large portions of law enforcement are behind a fascist white supremacist politician. History repeats itself, or doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does echo. Here's dozens of NYPD wearing George Wallace insignia and assaulting New York City Black Panthers inside a courthouse. Folks, these people are without principle. That is why they are still allowed on Twitter, because Twitter is without principle. With all that, this is all -1. I said I was going to cover this most of the week, and I will be, because it's important to understand who we are fighting against. And I mean ideologically. Now, I'm not an ideologue, folks. I espouse classical liberalism, but there is all kinds of leeway within classical liberalism. There is not any leeway within classical liberalism for fascism. The fascists reject liberalism. You must understand this. They rejected liberalism at the time. That is classical liberalism. The framing that the Marxists, far leftists put out is nonsense. It is so they can scapegoat. It is so they can get away with their evil plans. But let's look at what happened and what went on months ago. So first, let's get to this. Actually, I want to see this. From The Sun. This is a UK paper, if you aren't aware. It says, truly disgraceful. Candace Owens shares pics of fiery BLM riots and claims Antifa activists were part of a mob who stormed the Capitol. I don't know if Candace Owens said that at all. What she did say was, we're going to compare one for the other. These are the pictures from Antifa. And here we're going to have her tweet. These images capture the horrific scene that took place outside the Capitol building today. Truly disgraceful. Oh, wait, my mistake. These were actually taken from BLM protest over the summer. Did she say that it happened? No, she made a joke. She compared it. She called out your hypocrisy. My hope is that not all violent agitators are arrested and their names are, my hope is that all violent agitators are arrested and their names are revealed publicly. Call it a hunch, but my guess is there are still Antifa thugs in the mix. A lot of people have said that. We don't know. It's hard to say. Here are some more of the pictures. Why is this mainstream newspaper taking an ideological stance on what this woman said? Why? Because as I continue to tell you, and I will continue to describe to you this week, when you are on the right, if you are a patriot, if you believe in classical liberalism, if you believe in conservatism, which is a classical liberal movement, by the way, folks, if you believe in the Constitution, if you are not for the progress of the left, that is the leftward leaching towards the Marxian utopia, towards Stalinism. If you're not part of that, then you are an evil person. And they, being the oppressed, even though they own every ounce of the institutional power, right? The media who covers for them, academia who teaches them and indoctrinates them, the democratically controlled government, the Democrat-controlled government, that is, the Democrat Party, the largest party in the world with the most members, who control all of the deep state institutions, all of the bureaucracy, they have covered for them time and time again. We are having a purge right now of folks because of social media, because social media covers for the leftists. That is why these people on the left are still allowed to say horrible, nasty things on Twitter while people on the right are purged. It is why a few fools walking into the Capitol building, who were allowed in largely by police. Some did try to break in. There is video of that. I've shown that. I'm not going to be dishonest to you. But they walked through pretty much without disruption, pretty much without having much vandalism at all. There were a few people who did a few things. but it was very, very rare. If this was Antifa or BLM on the other side, the Capitol building would have been burnt to the ground. Mark my words. That would have happened. Here, from the Geller Report, Portland Antifa and BLM launches explosives at federal building with agents inside. Pelosi backs the terrorists. This was on July 18th, 2020. And we can go through, read the story. Nancy Pelosi, unidentified stormtroopers, unmarked cars, kidnapping protesters, and causing severe injuries in response to graffiti. These are not actions of a democratic republic. Well, I would agree with you, Nancy, unless you have the people so upset because you locked them down because you're all about your power and bringing in some sort of great reset. Trump and his stormtroopers must be stopped. Well, it wasn't Trump. Graffiti, how about explosions, hammers, knives, sledgehammers, slingshots, and metal ball bearings, bringing lasers, pipe bombs, and more? And that's from Andy No. Of course, we can go through all this, but Nancy Pelosi wants to blame the Nazis, of course. I'm sorry to tell you, folks, but if there is a growing Nazi presence in the United States, it is because the far left is allowed to go with impunity. They can do whatever they wish and nothing happens to them. With this purge going on social media, and now people selling each other to the federal government because they were at the Capitol building, some of them weren't even involved in the protest. There is a military officer, from what I've heard, who was there at the protest, not at the Capitol building, had already left and went home, but because she was there at some point in the day, well, she is now being investigated by the military. And what else is going on? Well, we have call after call after call for the expulsion of certain members of Congress who did nothing. Trump was still in the middle of his speech when people were storming the Capitol building. How can you incite something when people are miles away or blocks away or however far they were? I'm not exactly sure the exact site of the speech. And they were already there going in while Trump was making his speech. He incited nothing. There were no dog whistles. This is all how the left works. It's all gaslighting. It's all crazy making. And they have the power. Therefore, they get to do it. But they will tell you they don't have any power because the Nazis are coming. The Nazis, the Nazis, the Nazis. Well, folks, I'm sorry to tell you, but you don't even know what Nazis are because you who use that word flippantly are truly the fascists. And I can show you that time and again. And I show it to people all the time because it's easy to break down on first principles and based in their very writings. There are still leftists out there who think that fascists believed in capitalism. This is not true. They rejected laissez-faire capitalism. That idea is from classical liberalism, and the United States hasn't been engaged in it since basically the Federal Reserve Bank was enacted, but really since FDR took office and established the New Deal. Breaking. Portland Antifa and BLM launch explosives at federal building. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Cassandra Fairbanks. This is July 18, 2020. From Newsmax. Analysts, media have hypocritical double standard on Trump versus BLM protest. No kidding, right? This is on Thursday the 7th. It says Wednesday was proof that how corporate media and Democratic politicians report and comment on acts of civil unrest depends on who is engaged in the rioting. Absolutely. This is exactly my point. 6 months ago, the New York Times, which has been described as the national paper of record, made excuses for rioters who attempted to take over the federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon, as did Chris Cuomo on CNN and many other pundits on left-wing propaganda outlets. It reported that the nightly assault on the federal courthouse has been part of a much wider peaceful resistance that began assembling nearly 2 months ago in the wake of George Floyd. The Times continued. The aim, as it has been in other cities, was to assemble for sweeping policy reforms and racial justice. And we can go on and on and on. It says liberal Vox's German Lopez proclaimed during last summer that while rioters are destructive, dangerous, and scary, they serve a purpose because they can lead to serious social reforms. So, by that standard, you should believe that what happened in D.C. was okay. I do not. I think most of it, though, was far more peaceful than what we saw over the summer, which obviously led to much violence. And there has been much violence on the left for the last decade. So what we are really seeing, folks, is someone who judges but does not apply the judgment back to them. An unprincipled person. When Christ said, judge not, for whatever measure you judge will be judged back to you, he didn't say don't make judgments. We know from 1 Corinthians that Paul said that you could judge people within the church. He actually talks about judging right after that. He talks about not casting your pearls before swine. Swine are those who do not hear, who will not hear, because they are ideologues. And he says that you must be careful because they will trample your pearls under feet. There's no point in speaking with them. Now, why would you know that someone is swine, that you should not cast your pearls before if you do not make a judgment? Of course you make judgments. What Christ said is to apply your judgments equally, because the judgment that you apply to others, God will apply to you. And that is called being principled. He believed that every person who forced their way into the Capitol should be arrested. CNN report on August, mass destruction in Kenosha, Washington, as fiery but mostly peaceful. Correspondent Omar Ginez described the scene as an expression of anger and frustration. The entire background was engulfed in flames. Likewise, last year during the BLM protests, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo made excuses for the riot, saying, please show me where it says protesters are supposed to be polite and peaceful. Well, I will tell you, it's in the First Amendment, Chris. You should try reading that little thing we call the Constitution. If you even believed or cared about it, you probably would know that. From Town Hall, new study shows hundreds of BLM protests turned violent. This was September 8, 2020. And it gets into basically the study. Oh yeah, violent, mostly peaceful, as we just covered there. And from the Princeton study, over the past 4 months, hundreds of protesters have turned into violent, destructive riots. Here is a picture. 3-month study. Black Lives Matter protest intent to show they are overwhelmingly peaceful. But reports revealed that 570 violent demonstrations, riots, nearly 220 locations spread all across the country. Let's pull that up, folks, and let's look at this little map a little bit closer. Let's see, demonstrations across the Black Lives Matter by demonstration type. By the way, as this happened, Black Lives Matter lost respect and their popularity went down. So here is the actual study. Why don't I have, I don't have a page number on this. Oh, it's not fully loaded yet. So, well, another time we can talk about it. But like most of these studies, it is probably relatively dense. So a better look at the map. So riots versus protests. And we can see everywhere there were protests, practically, there were riots. Of course, we have hours and hours of footage. Black Lives Matter protester assaulted a black store manager in Pittsburgh after mobbing his McDonald's. That was Ian Miles Chong, an excellent source on Twitter. If you want real, on-the-ground reporting, he often re-reports things that people put out there. I'll see if I can come back to the study. From Time Magazine, 93% of Black Lives Matter protests have been peaceful. New report finds. No, that's not what the report found. August 24th, following the shooting of, we all know. And this was posted just prior or just at the same time as this article from Town Hall. I want to pull this up to juxtapose, see, September 8th and September 5th. And they're talking about the same studies. However, they're not talking about all of the conflict. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project analyzed more than 7,750 BLM demonstrations in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. The report states that more than 2,400 locations reported peaceful protests, with fewer than 220 reporting violent demonstrations. So what? Because here, that's not what the numbers say at all, in fact. It says 3 months, 570 violent demonstration rioters, and near 220 locations. So you can manipulate data by your framing and phrasing, but we can be, you know, 93% peaceful. I think that the protest in DC was 99.9% peaceful, much like the COOF survival rate. So, yeah, this is a 23-page report. I will go through this another time, probably later this week. We will look at it more deeply. I do know, as I showed you before, that I think it was last week, that there were far significant less arrests. Now, of course, there will be more, but just saying, there were less arrests over the course of the 6th last Wednesday than here recently. But I must say this as well. I believe that the police were far more heavy-handed. That seems to be the case. Maybe less prepared. It's hard to say. I also suggest that you go watch Viva Fry's Sunday night stream this past Sunday with Robert Barnes. I try to catch them every Sunday. If not, I watch afterwards. And it's always very good. And Barnes is a very intelligent man and a very great analyst and a very well-renowned constitutional lawyer. So it says, F Thanksgiving, Portland Antifa attack BLM supporting grocery war memorial. And this was from Thanksgiving. They've been doing this over and over and over again. The PNW Youth Liberation Front, which is just Antifa with a different name, call for Indigenous comrades for a decentralized anti-colonial day of action on Thanksgiving Eve. Take direct action. So this isn't an incitement to violence. This is PJ Media. 10 big fat lies you're being told about the Portland riots. This is July 26, 2020. Go home, feds. Democrats have fully pivoted on the nightly Portland riots. They have gone all in, blaming the riots on President Trump. And it goes on. This year's election time is short. Mobs are deployed to cause chaos and misdirection as they were in Portland, elsewhere in months leading up to after the 2016 presidential election. That's right, because we have such short memories. This was happening back then as well. Lie 1. The riots are committed by mostly peaceful protesters. No, that is not true. Arsonists are not peaceful, folks. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler allowed the riots to go on in a section of downtown for 6 weeks before the Trump administration came in to protect its own buildings, rolling up the bad guys and attacking them. They actually had to deputize the state police, federally deputize them in order to get anything done because the state police weren't able to do anything. Let's keep going. Tear gas, mayor says, was a total surprise. No, it wasn't. In fact, Mayor Wheeler said, let's stop using tear gas at a certain point until it got too bad. Moms bravely leave children's side to attend riot. Oh, man. These dads with leaf blowers showed up out of thin air. When dads showed up to the riots, of course, to get dads to show up with leaf blowers, which you can come and learn are deadly useful in a riot. I hadn't even heard of most of these things. This is just absurdities. I don't even want to read all this. I'm just showing you can find counter narratives, of course, with far better evidence. See, I'm not an ideologue, folks. I'm principled. I will call it out on both sides. That is where you need to be. Expert Andy No. It wasn't Antifa at the Capitol riots. This is the Washington Examiner on January 6th. And Andy No wrote about this in his blog. BLM Antifa tried to break into the federal buildings in Portland for months in 2020 using explosive power tools, rope, etc. The tanks never came in. The national response was that it was wrong for federal officers to even protect the building. That's what they said. Funny how it's quite different now. What many are saying is true. If these were Black Lives Matter storming the Capitol, tanks would have been in the city by now. The response is to tell the story of our nation's racist history and present. How can we stop it from the future? Right. This is all gaslighting. We all know, any of us who are not ideologically possessed or have eyes to see and ears to hear, we all know what actually happened. the governments mainly stood down and allowed these folks to riot. And there was not a heavy-handedness. In fact, there were pictures of D.C. up in flames. We know this. And so this goes on and on and on. Again, go look at this yourself. I'm not trying to make this super long today. Here is a Rumble video, episode 111. Federal buildings are attacked by Antifa, BLM, and all Democratic states to trigger Trump. This is December 17th, 2020. It says, in this video-based podcast, I discuss how BLM Antifa groups are attacking federal buildings to force President Trump to deploy federal police, DHS, and National Guard so they can accuse him of abusing his power on the American people or on the fake news, which is a reality. They are only there to protect federal buildings from domestic terrorism, also known as peaceful protesters, according to CNN and the family news outlet groups. BLM is attacking federal buildings as assigned by and coached by the Democrat Party. It is the Democrat Party, folks, not the Democratic. I say it incorrectly all the time, but it is the Democrat Party to symbolize hate for President Trump and send the message to America that people hate the Fed, aka Trump. And basically the point he is making here is that they have done these things, and the governors and the mayors have allowed these things to happen to basically blame Trump over and over again. Now, I'm not going to play the video. You can go check that out if you would like. I'm going to just keep moving. From the New York Post, Antifa rioters vandalized federal buildings in Philadelphia. Cops say January 5th, the day before the insurrection. And, of course, we have a bunch of names here. A group of far-left rioters in Philadelphia are facing charges for vandalizing federal buildings on New Year's Eve. The same thing happened in Portland, and that is why Ted Wheeler finally came out and condemned Antifa. Finally, after months and months and months, since last April, if I'm not mistaken. And we could have told you all this stuff was going to happen. I showed you a bunch of Project Veritas videos the other day. These people are rocked and cocked and ready to roll to destroy and burn down every single thing that has been built up over centuries. Now, do I believe that we need a little bit of a reboot? As far as the scope and size of the government, absolutely. Do I think that doing it through a violent means is good or fruitful? No. No, I don't want violence in any way, shape, or form. I also don't think that we can roll things back overnight. They've been building up for a long time. I also know and understand that the globalists actually run things, that there is global supports and ties, and that insurrection in the United States, true insurrection, true civil war, which will be coming, folks. It is coming to our doorsteps very soon. I believe, as I've stated numerous times, now I'm liable to change my opinion in the future, but I believe we have at least this administration and probably one after. That is the Biden-Harris, or just the Harris administration as it should be accurately called. And I believe that it will get worse by the end, and really the next election. We'll either see Trump back in or maybe some other populist, and things will get really off the rails. The projected date for the Great Reset to be complete is 2030. We know that Joe Biden, I see this often, that political analysts talk about Joe Biden wanting to go and, he's not going to be a second-term president, blah, blah, blah. Joe Biden openly said this himself. He said, I'm not seeking two presidencies. I'm going to be a one-term president. He said that from the beginning. So know what you voted for, know what other people voted for, know what they did to get him in, obviously, as there were questionable practices that occurred. And just understand, folks, that might makes right to these folks. They hold no principles. It says roughly 50 people clad in black, that is black bloc, descended upon the city center and defaced a historic U.S. Customs House, Robert Nix Federal Building, and a federal detention center. Late Thursday, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported. The federal lockup at 7th and Arch Streets was vandalized by far-left protesters and Antifa-related graffiti. Now, we do know that before in the past, Pennsylvania, when riots and things came there, were dispersed quite quickly. They weren't playing around. Pennsylvania is an interesting state, having grown up living on the border and being in and out of Pennsylvania and having friends in Pennsylvania all my life. And it's an interesting state where it is kind of blue-collar Democrat, which makes it a bit of a red state, but it goes back and forth. They really like their unions and other things. Of course, Philadelphia is very much left-wing, as most cities are. Pittsburgh, I think, is less so, but I haven't been there in some years. And the best I know is there's been a good free market revitalization of Pittsburgh in the last decade or so. So that is wonderful for the Pittsburgh area. From January 12th, 2021. This is the OPB.org. That is the Oregon Post Capital. Or Oregon Post. I think that's what it is. Yeah, anyways, you can find this. Just type in the title here. Portland's protesters spot double standard in restrained response to Capitol insurrection. Oh, there was a double standard and restrained response because there was tear gas, even though there was people saying there wasn't any tear gas. You know what? There was also not weapons, yet the media keeps saying that there were weapons there. I have yet to see a single ounce of footage of weapons. There was one person with zip ties that I am aware of. That could have been to close off doors. That could have been maybe to kidnap people. Who knows? But there weren't really any weapons. Where do you see weapons at? What I saw, every ounce of it was this. I saw police in riot gear or stuff like this, and I saw police using tear gas to hold people back, and then people eventually opened doors. It says, local Black Lives Matter protesters glued to the insurrection. I love the framing here. It wasn't an insurrection. What Black Lives Matter and Antifa have been doing have been insurrections. What happened here was a bunch of people got a little out of hand. It was a riot. They went into the Capitol building. Many of them were let in, and they left. Some people died. From a person in my live chat from this weekend on the Ends Justify the Memes, the live show that I do, one of the people were punched by the cops, and they fell 50 feet, and that's why they died. I read about, I believe it was in the New York Post, about one woman who was trampled. I find that hard to believe because I didn't see any mass movements in that manner like it was Black Friday and people were fighting over deals. What I do know is that a police officer did die. I know a woman was shot in the neck without cause. And that person, that federal police officer, should be prosecuted to the furthest extent of the law. That was just an unjust kill. Glued to the insurrection at the Capitol, at the home, and at work, they said they were struck by the restraint which law enforcement response to the mob, mostly white Trump supporters in D.C. Again, so they have to racialize it. So right there, they're scapegoating white people, like the left in Nazi Germany scapegoated Jews, and they call it an insurrection when it was obviously far less destructive than anything that we have seen by Antifa. It says, in Washington, D.C., compare the tear gas, riot munitions, and other heavy-handed tactics police, including federal law enforcement, used in Portland this summer. Well, those people came out with weapons. They also took over a city block. Here's a picture of some folks with some weapons. That is in Salem, though. Unlawful assembly is D.C. protest turned violent. Salem isn't in D.C. You can't carry weapons openly in D.C., folks. You cannot open carry in D.C. You can't conceal carry in D.C. For years until, Heller versus D.C., you couldn't even have a handgun in your home. They had banned it. Every night we were met by violence, tear gas, batons. Every night you went out to beat people up, too. There's no sympathy for you. You're evil. You are absolutely evil. And to try and twist this any other way is evil. From the Wrap, everyone is wondering why MAGA Capitol mob is treated so differently than BLM protesters. They weren't. They were probably treated more aggressively. That is what happened. I mean, if they were treated differently, it was more aggressively. to some extent. I'll tell you another thing, though. Don't see a single weapon here. Here's a dude in some boog gear, if you want to call it that. By the way, folks, don't buy these helmets. You're wasting your money. They don't do anything except for protect from shrapnel. There are better ballistic helmets you can get these days. Social media erupts with comparisons between the differences in law enforcement response to the Capitol, blah, 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 blah. And if they did do it less heavy-handed, I guarantee you it was because the mayor told him to stand down. Recall also that Nancy Pelosi went to the military, went to the Pentagon, and said, you all have to stop Trump. That is, by all accounts, true insurrection. That did happen. While police use tactics include tear gas and violence against BLM protesters, law enforcement officers at the Capitol were subdued in comparison against the Trump supporters, many of whom breached the building. No, they didn't have as many people out because I don't think they thought it was going to be as bad because there have been many, many MAGA rallies that were quite peaceful. Do I need to recall when Senator Rand Paul was leaving the RNC and was attacked and the police had to protect him? He had to leave the RNC, try to get back to his hotel, foolishly. I don't think he understood the gravity of the situation. And him and his wife were attacked, and the police, very few of them, a handful of them, had to protect him from a mob. Who are the insurrectors? PolitiFact. This is going to be hilarious. Again, just so we can be even-handed here. Black Lives Matter protesters and Capitol assault. Compare the police response. Well, that looks pretty heavy duty. Secret Service counter assault team. My old Marine Corps unit used to train with them. One of them, the first unit I was in. Early in the Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, D.C., police used methods designed to dominate the crowd, including chemical irritants and lines of police in full riot gear charging at protesters. As rioters stormed the Capitol building in January, Capitol Police forces were quickly overwhelmed and showed relative restraint and immediate aftermath of the attack. Federal and D.C. police planned for unrest from Black Lives Matter protesters, blah, 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 blah. The police response to the assault and vandalism. What vandalism? There's some trash. There's a few people, I think, that defecated and peed in the hallways, which I'm sorry to laugh about, but it is kind of funny. I mean, it kind of is, because it's like, you guys are screwing us, so here you go. Even though, obviously, a bit disgusting as well. I'm not even going to say that Biden will be the president, but I'm not calling him this ridiculous name that we never called anybody beforehand. Anyways, Biden said that the restraint and handling of Trump supporters in the Capitol reflected unequal justice. No. It absolutely did not. So at the Lincoln Memorial, this is deeply disturbing. Okay, why? Because they were burning things down. Do these guys have a bunch of weapons? No. No one can tell me that if this had been a group of BLM protesters yesterday, they would have been treated very differently. Well, they were, because we saw it in the summertime. There was no way to know how the events might have unfolded differently if these protesters caused on January 6th had been police brutality rather than supporting the president who lost an election. Already, we have documented major differences in the initial posture of the police. Okay. What are those differences? Are you going to get to it, or are you just going to bury it? Because I guarantee you will bury it, and it'll be completely fake news. After the Minneapolis police killed George Floyd. No, George Floyd killed himself, folks. That is a fact. The fentanyl dose that he took killed him. Did the police help? No. But it was the fentanyl that killed him. He killed himself. It is a suicide. Unintentional suicide. Around 1,000 people marched through D.C. This was May 29th. Call for justice and police brutality. Tensions flared. Some protesters stopped at the White House, pushing down metal barriers that separated them from law enforcement being marched. Around 11:30 p.m. that night, the more intense round of protests took place outside the White House. The Secret Service, D.C. police, and Park police used chemical agents to disperse the demonstrators. Yes, they were burning things. They advanced through Lafayette Park, holding shields and firing chemical agents because they were burning things. They rushed the president to underground bunker. Well, what did they do? with this, they responded with firearms and shot a lady. And some people are calling her a Nazi, and they're glad that she had been killed. Trump tweeted that protesters would have met with vicious dogs and ominous weapons. That's not what he said. But we can't go back and fact check that because, well, he's been deleted from history, right? In the days following, police used tear gas, horse-mounted charges, pepper spray. Yeah, because people were burning things. Nearly 300 protesters were arrested that night. By the end of the week, 5,800 active duty troops, agents, and officers, the mixture of federal agents. Well, look, man, there's no one left at the Capitol right now. They all went home. Fast forward to 6, when Trump supporters walked up to a portable metal barricade to the Capitol grounds. They saw a handful of officers in regular uniform standing their ground. Yeah, because, why? Look, this is it. This is not hundreds. This is a handful, just like they said. In fact, I will be interviewing on the Ends Justify the Memes, one of the people who was there. That will be tomorrow, January 13th. We will be doing the show at 6 p.m. because of accommodating his schedule. Don from Plebeian Media. And he was there. But as soon as one person decided to press on, the momentum swelled. The marchers and officers struggled over control of the barricade. The weight of the crowd soon spent officers right. By 1:15 p.m., a line of police were tussling with the Trump supporters. Okay, so it happened in the day, not in the middle of the night. The riots, of course, were far worse. 11:30 p.m. at night. The crowd didn't split apart until 3:30 a.m., which was 4 hours. So let's get back down here. Rioters shoved police officers, spraying chemical irritants and hitting them with lead pipes. Saw no evidence of that whatsoever. No lead pipes, only folks who were pepper spraying back. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I didn't see anybody walking around with lead pipes. PolitiFact, you are liars. Police deployed flashbangs and pepper spray in an attempt to ward off. By 1:46, Rep. Elaine Luria was evacuated from the office after a report that a pipe bomb had been discovered nearby. Supporters of the president are trying to force their way in. Have not heard about this at all. 2:11 p.m., rioters penetrated the police perimeter on the west side of the Capitol and began to climb the walls. A male intruder shattered windows at the south side of the building and climbed inside, and other members of the mob. 10 minutes later, Vice President Pence was escorted from chambers. And then a video at 2. So here is over a few hours. It talks about photographs. Around 2:45, a plainclothes police officer was shot a woman as she attempted to break into a speaker's lobby. I don't think so. It looked like Ashley Babbitt was actually looking through the window. Around 3, the Army Security Ryan McCarthy activated the entire D.C. National Guard. And there became a 6 p.m. curfew, by the way, folks. An officer told CNN that the police had cleared the Senate floor of rioters by 3:30 p.m. So we're looking at a what? What's the time frame here? 1:15. Looking at 2 or 3 hours. They got the few people that did this out of the way versus the dozens and dozens of left-wingers that are out for blood and vengeance, and they say it rather openly. It says the Capitol was finally cleared at 5:40 p.m., 20 minutes before Washington curfew set in. And a failure to plan. That might be true. All that might have happened. But make no mistakes, folks. I'm kind of down with Robert Barnes. A lot of the QAnon stuff probably escalated this. I'm not part of any of that. I don't think that Q's a good thing to be involved with. It's a bunch of LARPing. Just because I can tell you about things that they don't talk about in the mainstream news, that might be called conspiracy theory, doesn't mean I'm a part of Q. It means that I understand and I'm awake to the realities of the world. Initially, the police arrested 14 people, blah, 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 blah. Are you going to get to the point of the article, though, PolitiFact? Black Lives Matter is viewed synonymously as being anti-police because they're openly anti-police. Some viewed it as an external threat to their job and their profession, blah, 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 blah. The chief police of the Capitol Police announced he would resign last week. Well, yeah. So I don't really know. Technically speaking, it would be really hard to make an arrest happen when you're by yourself. Yeah. Well, why did this happen? Because they didn't expect it to happen. The number grew to about 40. While that is a small fraction of the hundreds that were part of the mob, it is on the same scale as the first arrest of the Black Lives Matter protests, 6 on the first night, 19 on the second, and hundreds more in the days to follow. Maybe, but I mean, we're talking about arresting anybody who is potentially there right now because they are being absolutely insane and accomplices to murder because one police officer died. This is insane. But what do we have here? This is from metro.co.uk. Washington, D.C. in flames as protesters start fires near White House. This was a different scene, wasn't it? This was from June 1st. This is what D.C. looked like, folks. Do you recall this? Do you recall what actually happened there? This is from the Guardian. Fires light up Washington, D.C. on third night of George Floyd protests. Same picture. Again, June 1st. Fireworks being deployed. Do you understand the differences yet? And this goes through the whole story. Look at this. Oh, if Black Lives Matter did this, they would have rolled in the tanks. Well, they did worse. Smoke from multiple fires rising up in front of the Washington Monument, looking south from Maryland. Here from the Washington Post, CNN, curfew arrested as fires raging, or CNN crew arrested as fires raging in Minneapolis. Trump calls protesters thugs and suggests looting will lead to shooting. He did say that because that's what happens. When you loot, eventually people get fed up. And this, of course, has a bunch of points and whatever. What we have to understand is the situation in the summer was far worse, and they're just lying today because it's what they do. Protests explode across the country. Police declare riot in Seattle, Portland. That was July 26. What is this? The government executive. IGs to investigate federal officer deployments in Portland and Washington, D.C. Watchdogs will probe training and instruction, use of force, and other tactics July 23rd. Why? Because this is when the riots were kicking off. Look at this. Did we see any fires? Were there any shots? Was there anything? Did anybody die outside of the woman that was shot by the police, the man that I'm aware of that was hit by the police and fell, the police officer, the woman, from what I understand, was trampled, and whatever else happened? And the media has been really vague about the people that have died. Then we're back to Twitter. From Mr. Lee Carter. The tools to crack down on white supremacist terror already exist, but those in positions of executive authority are ignoring it or actively complicit in it. Creating a new anti-terrorist code will not fix that. It will give white supremacist executives more power. And it's funny because the DOJ came out and saying, well, white supremacy is like the big thing. Yet we have numbers from many groups, institutions. There's like less than 10,000 like avid white supremacist organizations. What they're talking about here is anyone who doesn't go along with their communist, Marxist, utopian nonsense. Karishma for Virginia House of Delegates, beware of anyone telling you that the police and military need more tools, fun plus power. No, they actually do. And they also need less, well, I wouldn't say more power. They need less power. They need to start following the Constitution, or the right is going to be against them, as they were at that little riot on Capitol Hill. It's been proven beyond extraordinary doubt that these are agencies will continue to shield white supremacy, plus simultaneously target black-brown movements, as has always been their function. Then why were the people in Michigan arrested? Why have they not infiltrated Antifa and completely taken them down? Why are the feds now rounding up anyone who is potentially inside the Capitol building, including little old ladies? You live in an upside down world. Robert Reich, who is a not serious person as well, your reminder, the United States Constitution says no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress who shall engage in insurrection or rebellion. Well, you have to understand where the Constitution comes from, why we started it. Shays' Rebellion. Shay was eventually acquitted. He was acquitted because of jury nullification, because the people were sympathetic to him. But he started this rebellion, and they started blocking courthouses and rioting, taking over people's businesses and theft and all those kind of things. That's what happened. All over the world, throughout history, the treatment against traitors to a nation has always been the same. Arrest swiftly, persecution vigorously, sentence harshly. The American traitors witnessed recently, from top to bottom, should be treated exactly the same. Oh, so Antifa should be treated this way, because that's what a principled person would think. Folks, your day of judgment will come, and I am telling you right now that all these people who do not hold the same standard for themselves or their team and their little team sport, they will be judged quite harshly. People for Bernie, let's start with a $16 trillion climate package, because that's what all this is about in the end. We have to burn everything down, destroy everything in order to save the climate. Agenda 21. We have to take the people in the lower hemisphere and the southern hemisphere and bring them all up north and put everyone in cities, and therefore the wild can expand. Or the Georgia Guidestones, which says that we have to keep the world population under 500 million. That's eliminating 99% of all of the world's population, folks. This is their stated goals. This is what they want to do. Read Agenda 21. Look at what the World Economic Forum says about its Great Reset. Public pressure works. Amazon suspended Parler from its platform today. It's time for Amazon, who received 850,000 from ICE since 2018, also cut ties with Planter, a data collection software assisting ICE agents in raids and deportations. You see how these people work? Never enough. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep going further and further left, keep being an extremist. And they justify it, and they have the backing. Because Trump used his platform on social media to give national orders. They believe that they were his militants, or militia. No, you believe that. You say that because you get to do all the framing, and you're in this never-ending witch hunt of enemies. And what's happening is because you're doing this, you're disenfranchising people, and the violence, the level of frustration will rise. And I can promise the Antifa people, watching their pathetic little self-defense training videos or whatever, when people who are prior vets are fed up and they want to do things to you, it's going to be bad for you, not them. Not them. We've seen it with the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys absolutely whoop the soy boys. The soy boy Antifa woke scold folks get their butts whooped time and again. Now, I don't want any of it, but I'm just telling you, this is what's going to happen. Says these despots must be removed. Post haste, this moment demands we use everything at our disposal. So this is basically calling for the expulsion of these people from society, which they have been, just like all leftist movements do. Mao did this, right? Stalin did this, right? This happened in Cuba. This happened in Venezuela. This happens everywhere around the world. I played you yesterday a video from a Bernie campaign official who said the same thing. This is what they think. And if you are on the right and you believe that too, you're no better, folks. You don't have any moral high ground. And therefore, it's just a war of who will exterminate who. And frankly, I find it both evil and disgusting. Instead, those of us who are patriots who want to live free lives, we need to create and build our own communities and start things from the grassroots. That's all we can do. And I know they may come after us. They will try. But trust me, they will be more concerned and occupied with their own nonsense and eating their own, as they always do. I need not remind you, but I shall, that the author of Mao's Little Red Book was then later on in prison because he wasn't against, but supposedly the things in the little red book that he wrote himself, he violated. Every freaking time. Many of the rioters believe they were following Trump's orders to seize the Capitol, and are waiting further instructions. From GQ magazine. Did you read their minds or something? How do you know that? How do you know that? The failure of the Capitol Police and federal law enforcement to protect the Capitol, the United States is profound, is inexcusable. Here we have video appearing to show the Capitol Police remove barriers and enable protesters to walk right into the Capitol. Well, yeah, I've played this before. Let's see if I can get this to play real quick for you.
Please.
Well, you can go find it yourself, because I'm not going to spend all day doing that. Here, this is St. John's Church. You remember when fires were set and Trump took the picture? It was just a photo op. It was just a big stage photo op. Remember that? It says, look at the damage inside.
St. John's Church, widely known as the Church of the Presidents, was used last night by the current commander-in-chief to make a statement. Shortly after authorities used force to clear the area of protesters, President Trump walked to the church from the White House and held up a Bible, that moment not sitting well with the bishop who oversees the church.
If he had come...
Well, forget the bishop. Press secretary on targeting of St. John Church. Why it's hurtful.
President Donald Trump is monitoring the violence from the White House, and he does not have to look far to see the demonstrators and the rioters. There were hundreds of protesters right across the street in Lafayette Park. Secret Service agents even rushed the president to a bunker in the White House on Friday night. Correspondent Owen Jensen reports now from the White House. Owen?
Tracy, here at the White House earlier this afternoon, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany held a news conference. I asked her what the president's reaction is to the burning and defacing of St. John's, which is nearby.
White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany addressing the violence and rioting.
The president has made clear that what we are seeing on America's streets is unacceptable. Violence, looting, anarchy, lawlessness are not to be tolerated.
Earlier, her boss, President Donald Trump, tweeted, "Sleepy Joe Biden's people are so radical left that they are working to get the anarchists out of jail, and probably more."
And Kamala Harris and others have, and Joe Biden have provided bail bonds for them. See, again, it is okay because the left owns all of the institutions. Here, this is the local Fox News channel, folks. I grew up with this. This is Fox 5 DC.
Hear me okay? Have you been able to talk to some folks out there? You know, we've been seeing police cars set on fire. We've been seeing a lot of violence break out in different cities throughout the country. When you talk to folks out here, are they trying to keep the peace? Is the purpose here to just make the biggest ruckus they can? Or is it just a small group of people, like we saw earlier in your live shot, throwing rocks and starting a dumpster fire?
Here's the thing, Sharon. It's a very complicated situation here. There isn't just one massive protest. There's several small protests happening in the same area. You see, right behind me is a peaceful protest. This is actually very quiet. The noise you're hearing right now is actually coming from the protest right behind me, about 100 yards that way. But here's the thing. It's all about emotion, Sharon. The people here, they're angry. After the death of George Floyd, a lot of the people here...
Okay, I'm going to fast forward this a little bit because he's talking.
Muriel Bowser, that was her message today.
We just had an explosion right here at the trash can, right behind us. Sir, you okay? You okay? All right. The trash can over here just exploded behind us. You can still see it right now. Look at the fire right here. There was something in that trash can. It just exploded. You can see it right here. People were running away. It's just a chaotic situation going on over here, Lauren. People, sorry about the language, but people, as I said before, they're angry and they're taking it out on the city right now. And there are a lot of peaceful protesters here who are angry at those individuals doing things like that, setting trash cans on fire, things that'll do nothing to help the situation. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then she cussed, and then she said, yeah, F off, and everybody clap. You're so brave. No, you're not. You're not brave. You would be brave to improve your own life. You would be brave to quit inciting and asking for violence. That is courage. Real courage is to not go down to your baser emotions. And that's about all I have, guys. I just wanted to cover the uneven handling of things in a more detailed format. Of course, I know most of you remember. Look, I started doing this in the summertime during the height of these things. Obviously, I've been covering it because it's bad, and I'm going to remain principled and say that people shouldn't be storming the Capitol building. I don't really think they stormed it that much. A few people did, a few bad actors, but when you're walking between the velvet ropes, we're talking about something else. And again, go watch Robert Barnes over on Viva Fry this past week and see what he's had to say about it, because I think he has a pretty good take. With that, folks, hey, you can go over to YouTube at the Ends Justify the Memes. That is our live show, my live show I do with a co-host and producer tomorrow night, Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. I will have Don the Pleb on from Plebeian Media. He was at the protest, and we'll talk. You can also check us out on DLive. That is ends_justify_memes. I do have a locals, all -1. Over on locals, I can upload to that directly. Maybe not these longer videos, but some of the shorter ones I do. And also go to my Rumble. Let it build, because eventually I will not be able to speak. With all that said, please like, share, and subscribe. This has been all -1, and I wish you all well.